No team is going to come through this period of lockdown the same. They will either come through stronger or weaker. As a leader, you have an opportunity to make sure you do what you can to help your team come through stronger. As I mentioned in a previous video, the most important thing you can be doing right now with your team is building trust. Truthfully, there will never be a time when a team gets to stop working on trust. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it takes time, but the rewards are huge. But especially in the time we find ourselves in, trust is more important than ever. Now, it's important that I remind you that the kind of trust we're talking about is vulnerability-based trust. When I begin working with leaders and teams, they confuse this with predictive trust, but there is a difference. Predictive trust is when I've come to know someone fairly well and I can more or less predict how they will react in any given situation. For example, when I give them a last-minute piece of work to do which requires a very tight turnaround time. That's not the kind of trust I'm talking about. I'm talking about vulnerability-based trust, where team members can be genuinely open and honest with one another, when there is a confidence that their peers' intentions are good, when team members have each other's backs. You will know when vulnerability-based trust is present, when team members and you as the leader can say things like, "I was wrong. I made a mistake. I need help. I'm not sure about that. You're better at this than me. And most importantly, I'm sorry." Vulnerability-based trust is important because people who aren't afraid to be genuinely open and honest about themselves are more than likely not going to engage in the kind of destructive behavior that wastes everybody's time and energy on the team. And it's very, very important. Just think back to a team that you've been a member of where perhaps that kind of trust that I'm talking about, the vulnerability-based trust, wasn't present. So what can you do to continue building vulnerability-based trust on your team? You may have heard me say before that culture flows from the top down. It's up to the leader to set the tone that they want to see the rest of the team engaging in. So being willing to admit as a leader when you are wrong to your team, being willing to admit when you've made a mistake, and even apologizing when an apology might be needed. I think back to a conversation I had with one of the leaders I was coaching. I remember her saying to me, when a leader apologizes to her, it makes her trust them even more. It's also up to you to admit when you just don't have the answers. We are in a time of great uncertainty, and building trust means admitting where you don't have the answers. By failing to admit that you don't have the answers to some of your team members' questions is simply leaving the elephant in the room. Of course, you can bring clarity on the things you do have clarity on, but it is quite okay to admit when you don't have the answers. Communication is key. Set the tone. Be vulnerable, even when there are no guarantees as to the outcome on your team. So to summarize, the foundational behavior for a cohesive and high-performing team is vulnerability-based trust and not predictive trust. One of the best ways for building that kind of trust on the team is for the leader to set the tone by admitting when they are wrong, when they make a mistake, don't know the answers, and most importantly, by apologizing when an apology is needed.